welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming. I'm Helga Christoffersen. I'm an assistant curator here at the museum, and it's an immense pleasure and honor to welcome Paul Chan and Carroll Dunham here for a conversation. And I want to reveal before that the three of us met 2 weeks ago. I had a kind of a beginning conversation that I'll also maybe reference throughout. But maybe to say the reason of bringing is everything okay?
Yeah, it's like a lounger.
It's dangerous. I know. We should kind of stay out seated. Back on track. As part of gathering artists here in conversations for our 40th anniversary, we of course looked back into the history of exhibitions and different moments in time and artists who meant a great deal to kind of forming this institution and its history. There was different interests in bringing you two in conversation. One of them is that you have both had solo shows here at the new museum that in a way was a kind of a survey of a larger body of work. In Carol's case, more than 2 decades of work in a show in 2003 on Broadway, and in Paul's case, your show titled 7 Lights that gathered this whole body of work that was presented really as one of the first shows in this new building in 2008. In April, I believe it opened. So this you've both been through the process of working with the team here and looking at all this work and maybe bringing it together for the very first time. And then another kind of really point of interest is that even though your practices might not, you work in very different media and maybe with very different kind of ideas, but one thing you really have in common is that, let's say, and we should discuss this, maybe aside to your practice or as part of your practice or kind of as a you've both really, and you are both engaging very much with the written word. So as much as you have a studio practice, there's a real dedication and very long-term engagement with the written word in Paul's case, and as a kind of an undertaker of a larger business at Badlands.
I'm an undertaker. That's true.
And in Carol's case, of course, through all the writing that you have contributed also over decades. And another really nice occasion is this book, Into Words, that came out on Badlands this year, that gathers Carol's writing. And so, of course, there's a conversation prior to this conversation also between the two of you because of that. But maybe to start off, I wanted to ask kind of each of you to maybe talk a little bit about the relationship between your practice, your making work, and then in a way kind of your dedication to really thinking about writing and the written word and putting out writing, or writing as an output. Let's say it like that.
Well, I didn't
Don't be shy.
I didn't start to think about writing seriously until I'd been making art for a fairly long time. So it wasn't something that I saw as being intrinsic to my work as an artist when I started. And it was actually, I was quite far along, I suppose, and I'd been exhibiting my work for a while, and I started to feel the need for something besides my work in the studio, because I work all by myself in my studio, and I spent a lot of time thinking, as one will, and I'm really interested in the problems and possibilities of writing about art. And so I decided I needed, as I say, I used to think I needed a hobby, but writing is too horrible to call a hobby. It's some other sort of thing. But I wanted to have something else, some other way to engage art and my other interests besides just working on paintings. And then, so I did that for quite a while, and then this guy came along with this proposal about doing a book, so here we are.
I remember the first piece I read by you. It was on Carol Walker's films in art form. And I remember how struck I was because, how to put it, like you veered out of your lane. You know what I mean? Like, why would you write about Carol Walker's films? But I was so struck by it, and I thought it was so incisive and empathetic to our practice that I started paying attention more. I mean, I knew you wrote before, but I think I didn't really pay attention until that piece. And then I remember your late Renoir piece, and I thought, who in their right mind would write about Renoir? What self-respecting contemporary artist would write about Renoir? But here you were writing about Renoir in a way that I thought was so moving that I kept paying attention. And then, it behooves me to point out the person who brought us together really here, Kathy Hallbreich, who at dinner one night we were just talking about you. Sorry, it was weird. And
People
then,
do that.
I guess. And then, I just said, hey, maybe there should be a collection of writings. Has there ever been a collection of your writings? And she said, probably not. And I said, we should really do that. And she said, well, why don't you email him? And that was it. That was like 2 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I guess that's a nice maybe anecdote, because I remember, Paul, you said that when you then asked Carol what, in a way, how much she had written or what was there, I remember maybe your first reaction was, not really so much.
I didn't think there was enough for a book. I thought that it was a really sweet idea, but that it would all sort of fall apart of its own weight, because I really didn't have a sense of what it all added up to as a body of work. But it turned out to be much more. I've been doing more of it than I even realized, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess it also made me kind of curious about then, in a way, the role that the writing serves for your kind of studio, your studio practice. In a maybe kind of, it almost sounded when you answered that it was more kind of an unconscious undertaking of, I'll just write something, and then it slips out, or you don't,
No. Well, like it's the two essays Paul mentioned, the one about Walker's movies and about late Renoir, those are good examples of both obviously completely different aisles in the store, so to speak, but both subjects or artists that were working, that I felt there were issues that I also needed to confront in my own, if not directly in my work, then in myself in some way. And I'm a bit older than I used to be, so maybe I'm interested in the idea of what artists do as they move along in their life. So Renoir's late work, I wrote an essay about Picasso's late paintings. That's an interesting thing to me, to see how you can think about that in as lively a way as we tend to think about young people's work. That seems like an important question to me. And in the case of Renoir, the fact that so many people take it as a given that his late work is crap, that's very important to me too, because it's not just to be perverse. I genuinely don't think it's crap, and that the reasons it isn't are very important. And there's always something like that with the Walker films. There was a kind of confluence of violence, sex, the sort of hideous underbelly of American culture. These were things that I I don't know that it's obvious that they would be of interest to me just from looking at my paintings, but they're of great interest to me personally. And writing about that was a way to grapple with it. And also, I like the idea that I was writing about something other than painting. I would like to do more of that.
Did you, reading over the book, do you now recognize certain elements that you go back to in your writing voice? You know what I mean?
I use some words too much.
Like what? Wait,
As has been pointed out in a couple of reviews. I'm afraid to say because it'll just make it worse.
Wait, you mean perverse?
But
You mean perverse?
well, I know that I'm.
We couldn't cut all of them out. We had to leave some of them in.
I don't know. It's hard for me to say. It's like looking for a through line in one's own artwork. You can never not be yourself. You know, you don't get to do that. So it's sort of. I know I have a point of view, and I know that I probably someone else who wanted to take the trouble could probably tell me more, in a way, more about my actual concerns than I could.
What struck me editing your book was your sentences. I mean, you construct sentences more than essays to me. I mean, there's some remarkable sentences there. The first sentence that starts the Elizabeth Murray essays, I love it. I made a poster out of it because I loved it so much. And so...
Free poster with a book.
Only through our website. badlandsunlimited.com. Where does that come from? You know what I mean? Because when people write, sometimes they're thinking about the paragraph, sometimes they're thinking about the whole thing, but it seems to me that you really write at the level of the sentence. So where does that come from?
I think that's actually true. I mean, I can admit to that from in here. I don't know where it comes from, but it just feels like, I don't know, it's like I know that my paintings start with line drawings, and I somehow know that to find my thoughts in writing, I have to find a sentence that almost works like a line. Like, I don't know if people still diagram sentences in school, but I always found that super
Apparently
interesting.
not.
You know, the idea that a sentence is a sort of structure with cantilevers and almost different little cul-de-sacs, and like a sentence can be a very complex thing. And I think you can put a lot into a sentence, you know, both in terms of objective, or, you know, manifest content, and also tone and attitude. I think you can embed an awful lot of information in a sentence. And I find that fun to do. It's like the most interesting aspect of writing to me.
It's fun to read because it's almost those sentences come up like a surprise. You know, kind of jerks you, and that was the real part of the real pleasure of editing the book and seeing it develop. You know, because you're paying attention at the level of the sentence. You know, which kept a reader's attention.
Paul, maybe I want to jump a little bit to your practice as well as part of starting even like a publishing venture and publishing writing by other artists, but also you know, you're also very much a writer yourself. And I wonder, maybe, sorry to go a little bit back, but maybe to ask you how that came about as part of your practice.
Badlands Unlimited, the press, started in 2010, and I started it because I was I had stopped making work for a time. I had stopped showing work. I'd stopped making new work. I would help people install old work, but I just turned down all opportunities to do anything. And a year into it, I needed a day job. I couldn't clean my studio anymore. There's only so many emails you can check. And I've wanted a press for a long time. I just didn't have the money. But in 2010, what was happening is the ebooks were on the rise. And ebooks are essentially dumb web pages. And I thought, well, I can design dumb web pages. So we started Badlands out of my studio in April 2010. I hired my first hire, Ian Chang, who's now a great artist. I'm very proud of him. And but he worked for me, and we started publishing books. We started first publishing ebooks, and then we started doing paper books. We started doing my own books because I own the copyright, so that was easy to clear. Our first book outside of me was the poems of Yvonne Rainer. It was our first collection of poetry that came out. And then we've been steadily doing 5 to 7 books a year ever since. Tip's our latest book, our fall book. And it's been great. It's nightmare. It's just, there's no money in books. No one reads, really. I mean, what's a book, honestly? So I'm not even sure why I'm doing it. But we still do it, and we love what we do. So maybe that's it. It's just working with different people, you know? I think as an artist, you're always looking for, I can't really say that. For myself, I'm always looking for different kinds of people to talk to, you know? There's no reason, I mean, we've never met before the book, you know? I knew your work, I respected your work, but wanting
same.
to...
No, it was a new relationship.
And it was like, it just gave us an excuse to sort of be in each other's orbit and learn a little something, you know, in the process of making something that we're happy with, you know. But also, I think, as part of the publishing mission of Badlands is really to publish non-academic, interesting books for people in their 20s and 30s. We're looking to make accessible, interesting books that people can afford. Because I didn't grow up reading monographs or catalogs that are $80 and weighs 90 pounds. You know, I didn't grow up reading those books. I grew up reading and stealing books that are like $9.95, you know, from libraries or the airport bookstore in Omaha, Nebraska. So that's what we do. We make trade paperback books about contemporary art and culture.
Books that are easy to steal.
Books are easy to steal. That's true. That's one of the metrics for our books is whether or not it'll fit in a certain type of backpack, or a certain kind of pocket. So our erotica has to fit in the back pocket. Your book can't fit in the back pocket, but it will fit in a school backpack, I hope.
When did you start thinking in terms, I mean, I don't know when you actually started writing in any kind of public way.
I started...
what form did that take?
I was, in high school, I had a choice of going to journalism school or art school. That was my choice. Those were the two. That was the path. That was the forked path. And I chose art because at that time, I was doing photojournalism, and there were too many men. It's just, photojournalism is just full of bros. Just like guys with gigantic cameras. Just gigantic. As long as their leg, you know? And it'd carry 4 of them. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't take it. It's like, I can't carry those. I couldn't physically carry the equipment necessary to be a photojournalist. So I thought, well, I'd just go to art school. And then in art school, I hated art. Like, I couldn't, and so all the kids at the Art Institute of Chicago who hated art ended up working on the student newspaper. Uh-huh. We were the Philistines in the school. And that's where I started, basically. But seriously writing, it wasn't in art. It was like in the late 90s, early 2000. It was more political writing. It was more of a sort of activist world that I was in. And I was writing essays and helping set up different things. And I needed to write. I needed to communicate. And so that was how it started.
So by the time you were exhibiting your work in galleries and things like that, you had already been writing outside of art for quite a while.
Years. Yeah. And you know, at the time also when we were I mean, in the 90s and early 2000s, zine making was really big. You know, I had friends who were doing I don't know if people remember, Maximum Rock, and there's a great zine called Maximum Rock and Roll, Punk Planet. It was like punk zines, basically. And the whole ecosystem of zines was so interesting. It's just very independent. Quimby's in Chicago, different places here. Kim's Video would sell the zines. And so it was just a kind of, it's just a time, a moment, And so it was like media work, basically. It was cool. Still is.
And Paul, I wonder with your work and in a way where you are today, what role? I mean, beyond the kind of a structure through which you now engage really actively and very intensively with the writing of others and other artists as well, and how that kind of exists side by side to your own practice today, and how you see those two things.
I liked what you said about writing as kind of a hobby, but it's too painful to be a hobby. In a way, I really started the press to give myself a day job because I didn't want to make art anymore. But now I started making work again, and now making art means escaping from my day job as a publisher. So I publish Monday through Thursday, and
It's amazing these tricks we play on ourselves.
It's true, because I didn't want that. You have to have a day job to make you feel good about doing something else, and the art, frankly, felt like a day job at a certain point, and I just resented it. I hated it. So publishing.
It's always like looking for something really horrible to make going into your studio feel good.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So like dealing with Excel sheets and like paying people.
Yeah.
It's just miserable. So then you make work at nights and weekends to escape.
What a relief.
I know, it's true.
Paul, I wonder with you, like the kind of on that note, because I think something you said at some point was, your avoidance of screens, or your we were talking about the 7 lights and how that the work that really was kind of comprised of, I guess, the largest body of work that was shown here was coming out of kind of a decision not to really not to engage with screen based work, even though that was somewhat close to the medium you were working in, and I wonder now, you must still spend most of your time behind the screen. I guess I'm trying to get also to the works that you showed here, and what that in a way that show meant for you, and how that kind of led you into Badlands as well.
Sure. The work I showed here was the 7 lights, and these are video projections that essentially mimic the look and feel of shadows coming through a window. So the projector would be installed on the wall or corner of a room, and it would project downward. And ideally, the first thought you would think walking into a space is, where's the window? And it's, the shadows are animated, and they're on 14-minute loops. And I love making them. I don't make them anymore. I loved making them. And before that, it was a lot of projections, animated projections. I draw them. It's mostly because I didn't have money. I think Lynn knows, actually. I had a big epic project where I was going to stage Henry Darger's works, like in real, it's like an epic, just actors, hundreds. I didn't have the money, and I didn't want to work with people. Actually, that was the other part. It's like, oh, wait, I want to do this huge thing. I don't want to deal with people. Yeah. So what do? So you kind of reconcile yourself with that you're never going to do it, but you find another way. And I ended up drawing them. I spent years drawing them. And so the first major animated projection was me sitting in front of a computer drawing. And other works before the 7 lights were all animated, basically, using stolen software. I didn't have money. But over time, I think I couldn't do it anymore because I'm too old. I don't want to look at a screen anymore. And also times have changed. In 2000, 2001, I think the screen as an idea and as a form wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. Now we can show high-def video and moving images on your phone in your pocket. Projectors are so bright you can project on the side of Mount Rushmore if you wanted to. The ubiquity of the screen is real, and it's terrible. I find it terrible. I say it's all fake news. They're great screen works, and they're great artists making screen works, you know, and I respect them. I can't do it anymore. But then the question becomes, are you giving up something by giving up screen work? And the thing that I gave up was motion. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter what I drew. It was really the polyphony of movement that mattered to me. In those early animations, the floor projections, it was really the polyphony of movements over time that kept my attention. It wasn't even really about what it was drawn. Shadows are beautiful that way. You can see it for a millisecond and know that it's a plane or a cloud, but it doesn't have the integrity of an outline where we need to recognize it as such. It's just a feeling you have. And that to me is the fundamental nature of moving images. It doesn't have to be something in order to be something. And so I think I tried to figure out how to make motion without a screen. And so I spent the last 3 or 4 years trying to figure that out. And so I think the first major iteration was at the Green of Tali Gallery this April, when I showed these things called breathers, where they're sewn fabric pieces that I design, put on fans. And the way they're put together is such that it controls the air pressure inside the fabric pieces. So I can animate them. I can control how they move. I can make them go this way or that way or that way. And it's my, weird solution to how do you make movement without a screen.
So essentially, like, the movement that was so profound and, like, so present in all of the lights is in a way kind of now channeled into that.
Yeah, to me, it's an extension of the moving image work. It just happens that you don't look at a screen. I still have to look at a screen to draw the patterns, but then I have to get on a sewing machine, and then I have to work with people to figure out the air pressure of this fabric. I have to figure out whether it's 1.1 ounce nylon or 1.9 ounce nylon. It's clothes making. We call it making clothes for spirits, because that's what it is. We're making clothes for air pressure, for it to move a certain way. We just made one, and I wanted to make one for a long time, where it felt like it was having an asthma attack, and where all it does is this, and it's I love it. I love it. I love publishing too, and selling books.
And I wonder, like, the experience of seeing all those, like, lights together at once. I guess it was the first time that they were really gathered in a show here and shown all together?
That's right.
Yeah. And what came out of that? Like, the process of putting that together and then seeing that, was that a moment of, like, okay, then I'll move on? Or
Oh, it was depression. It was depression. It was hard. I think showing in New York is hard. I think it was hard. I was very proud of it, but it was hard. And, and I think it was hard. What can I say? It was hard.
Yeah. The audio guy, too?
Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, there's something about being an artist with a certain turn of mind where you feel strongly that you would like your things to be seen by people, or I guess in some way you hope that will happen. One is one's own first audience, but then there's this idea that it would be great to have one's work inserted into whatever the discourse of the time is. And like when I had my exhibition at the New Museum, it was in the other space on Broadway. It wasn't, no offense to the New Museum, it wasn't like having a show at the Museum of Modern Art, but it was a real thing. There was a lot of attention on it. There was a lot of focus. And I don't think I had ever really confronted the depths of my own ambivalence about having like these competing drives to like be alone and work in a sort of solitude, and then to also just kind of expose yourself in the most repulsive way, you know, and that these two things actually coexist. And I was, quote unquote, lucky enough to have a chance for all, 20 years of my paintings to be seen. And it was very traumatic. And I mean, I'm not complaining, we should all have these problems, but it is hard. Paul's absolutely right. And I mean, I just think that's part of the confusing, ambivalent deal of what one does, and the way that art is presented in this culture and the whole delivery system, which involves criticism, opinions. We're not having potlatch ceremonies here. It's a very particular kind of thing, and it can be, it can be very exciting and also very unpleasant, and somehow one has to process all that to go forward.
But I wonder, I guess one element of that might be that you put all this work together in a scene, also by you for the first time in a space, and then what that triggers for you yourself. And then I guess another side is then the reception and the criticism.
That's
and
right,
the waves
exactly.
that comes from that. But I guess with you, I wonder, I think something you said at some point was that just seeing that work together made you realize something about a way that you had been working.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was
that you hadn't thought about like that before.
right, and it was very mundane. It was kind of, why have you been spending the last 20 years putting big things in the middle of rectangles? It was a real compositional, structural issue I had with my own work, and it actually led me out of what I think of as a kind of cul-de-sac that I was in when I was younger, in directions I couldn't have imagined at the time. Mm. But I was also I remember feeling very mixed things. I was very proud of the show. I know what was around in New York. I know what other people were doing in painting, and I know that my paintings occupied their own place, and that made me feel good. And I didn't feel apologetic about a single thing I had made, and that made me feel good. But at the same time, as one is one's own harshest critic. And so you have all that interior dialogue, and then you've got the peanut gallery weighing in, and somehow you have to integrate all of this. I survived. He survived. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, because you're both sitting in a way kind of evoking kind of trauma of coming out of these shows. Yet there also seems to be
I'm assuming we're dealing with a room full of fairly intelligent people here. It's I could sit here and go, it was awesome, but I mean that's not very interesting or particularly true.
No. But I guess my point was that but yet you also it seems real kind of pushes forward also came out of it.
Yeah, we survived.
You got to keep going.
That's true.
I mean, the thing is, I don't know about Paul. I would assume we feel similarly about this. I decided that for me, in terms of my own growth, this had to be value added. The opportunity to see 20 years of my own paintings in a space publicly that was being taken so seriously, I had to deal with that like a source of energy, not a source of depletion. And so that's absolutely what happened. I mean, I got energy from it, but I would never want to, it wouldn't be interesting to describe it as purely positive, because that's just not a very realistic way to talk about being an artist.
I want us to remember that phrase that you just said, exposing yourself in the most repulsive way. I think that's a great title for something.
Yeah, maybe returning to to writing. I want to ask you in a way what going forward, maybe now and onwards, what do you see what's the role of writing kind of in a kind of future perspective in terms of each of your individual practices?
You said you were writing on your own work, right?
I'm thinking of, the oddest essays to me in the book we just published are the things about my own work. 'Cause I kind of feel like I wrote them in a kind of fugue state. Like I can barely remember. They just sort of came out. And I find it, I don't know, because the idea of finding a verbal analog to nonverbal behavior, which is essentially what I think of my work, is pretty interesting to me, and I think I feel less self-conscious than I used to, so I feel like there's an opportunity there, but I also, I've written a couple of things about other people's work since we had to make our choices for the book, and I assume I'll keep doing that in some way. I find it rewarding. So I don't see a reason why I wouldn't try at least to keep going with it. What about you? You got anything to say in words, Paul?
I've got things to say in words. We're doing in the spring. We're publishing a book of Craig Owens, who's a critic who passed away. He's a young critic. He was one of the original members of the journal October, and he became a senior editor at Art in America. And it's a never-before-published interviews with him. It's called Craig Owens, A Portrait of a Young Critic, and it should be great. We're also doing a book with Aruna D'Souza about art and race and protest called Whitewalling. That's coming out in May. We're also doing our erotica series, New Lovers. So we have a great one coming out called A Million Blows by Jade Sharma, a great young writer. And so it's a lot of editing right now, and it's great. And because editing is, to me, at this point, a kind of writing, we're just working with someone else, and it's great. I've been writing a few things for Badlands, but it's mostly about cryptocurrency, because we started a group at Badlands, our press, called the Badlands Crypto Group, talking to artists and writers about the risks and benefits of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Are you someone that could explain Bitcoin?
What's that?
Are you a person capable of explaining Bitcoin?
Yes, we'll have an event soon.
Okay.
We'll give you a discount rate for the class. We made a pamphlet. Didn't I give you a pamphlet?
No.
Did you see my mom's knitted Bitcoin?
Yes. They're really good.
Yeah, so.
That's what I call sculpture.
You know what? I'm going to tell her that.
They're good.
She's going to be very proud. She said I'm selling it. It's too cheap.
His mother made a crocheted Bitcoin, which I saw in their office a couple of weeks ago.
It's for sale on badlandsunlimited.com. We take Bitcoin too and Ethereum for it.
Maybe as a follow-up in comment, thank you so much for coming, and the book is also in our bookshop.
Thank you.